Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Went and visited some Amish friends that we have this morning. We don't live too far from an Amish community and have been friends with them for quite a while. And stopped by there and was talking to them and kind of wanted to get their insight on what they think is going on and what they were aware of. And of course, he was very much wanting me to update him on all the most recent things that have happened in the news and in the new administration. For those of you that don't know, just because Amish, and these are old order Amish, these are very old-fashioned old order Amish, um, just because they choose to live a more reclusive and primitive life than you and I doesn't mean that they aren't aware of what's going on out there. They usually have a pretty good idea of what's going on. But anyways, in talking with them, they agreed with me that what we're seeing is a spiritual warfare taking place. He believes that we're living in the end times, and he said he fears that America may not last, be able to survive through this. And, my wife and I were also talking about, are we overreacting to this new administration? I mean, we've had liberal far-left presidencies and administrations in the past, so why is this one any different? I mean, we survived 8 years of Obama. Why would this one be different? Here's my take on it, and I'm not saying I'm correct, but here's my take. Bill Clinton was probably the first really progressive liberal president, even though by today's standards his presidency would be considered mild. At that time, it was, and he of course wasn't the first liberal president, but I'm saying his administration, the things that they were trying to push through were really progressive at the time. But America at that time was still very conservative and was not ready for a lot of those ideas. By the time Obama came along, America was a little bit more open. It was the start of the internet age, really, or at least social media. And a lot of these concepts, these very left progressive, communistic, and just deviant, as far as I will say, concepts were kind of laid out on the table. And at that time, people were still a little bit like, oh, well, what is this? I don't know. This is a little different. It makes me a little uncomfortable. But that through the social media, the internet, and then just the younger generation kind of taking it up, by the time that Joe Biden comes around, it's almost like a portion of America is finally ready for this very left socialist, progressive government. And so I do think that it's more dangerous than we ever saw with Obama's presidency or with Clinton's presidency. So, and with the Bushes, and they all had their failings, okay? So I'm not just picking on the left because they all had their failings. But my point is that I do think there's a lot greater danger right now, because it's almost like the time is ripe for this revolution into a new America. And so that's one of the things that we were talking about with our Amish friends, and they agree. They believe that the same way. They think that that things are going to get pretty bad, and they and their community are preparing for it. They're kind of buckling down and getting ready for it. And we were talking about the new digital currencies, and that they're probably going to be pushing at us. And they were already aware of it. And he said, I don't know what we're going to do. He says, because we're certainly not going to start accepting that kind of stuff here. He says, we only deal with cash, and that's how it's going to be. He said, so we'll just have to, make alternatives and barter and do different things. Along with that, there's another aspect to this that I hope it's not being forgotten in just all of the kind of chaos of all the, everything I saw today that he signed. So far, they've confirmed 17 executive orders, which is far more than any president in modern history has done in their first entire week of office. And he's only been in office a couple of days. So it shows that they're really, I think that they're really trying to push some radical change. There's also another kind of change that we need to be aware of. I'm going to put a picture up here. This is an article that the Associated Press released a couple of days ago, and then almost immediately pulled it back off their website. They didn't retract the article in the sense of saying that they were wrong. It's believed that they just pulled it off because it was probably a little bit too much for people. And if you read on that, they're talking about aggressive and misgendering of children. See, in the end, children, well, that's what they really want. Put up a couple more pictures here. One of them's from Lenin, and talking about how, well, that's what they want. They want to get a hold of our kids. They want to get a hold of how our kids think. And they want to separate the children from the rest of the family, from the parents. There's been a lot of talk over the last few months of this letting kids stay home and do their school at home. It's not working. It's not working because the kids aren't getting educated. It's not working because the teachers don't have absolute total control of how the kids are thinking and how they're being taught how to think. They're getting too much teaching and schooling from their parents and too much influence from their parents, which is why you're hearing Joe Biden push to get kids back in schools, because they don't like that. You see, they know that they may never win over folks like you and I. But if they can win the hearts and minds of the children, then all they have to do is sit back and wait. Look at the younger generation today. Oh, anyone 20 years old, or let's say, and younger. Teenagers and 20-year-olds today are very open to these very radical concepts of socialism, communism, transhumanism, transgenderism, things that you and I are like, wow, this is radical, this is crazy, or this is insane. These younger kids, they're more open to it. They're okay with it, a lot of them. And it's because we've set back far too long and we've allowed the government, a government run bureaucratically by typically very left-leaning people. In fact, in the Department of Education, probably, in my opinion, has more socialist and communist working in it than about any other government department. And they're the ones that's teaching our children. I know that what I'm saying may come across a little radical to some of you, but I think most of you would agree. I think they're coming for our kids. They want to win over the hearts and minds of our children. And now more than ever, we have to protect them. I've been talking a lot on here about if you still send your kids to public schools, you need to get them out of public schools. You need to get them out now. You need to get them out yesterday. It's going to get worse, folks. I may not have complete evidence for that, but I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. There's been legislation proposed in New York and Tennessee and other states that would allow the state to vaccinate the children in the schools without notifying the parents. There's even been some to authorize the state to do that even if the children aren't in school. So those of you that homeschool, you're not as protected as you think you are. There's talk and legislation of forcing transgender studies on children in school without the parents' notice and authorization, and that they couldn't opt out of it. These, what I think are despicable things, are coming. And they're coming because they know if they can get to the kids, they know that if they can re-educate the children, they won't have to worry about them when they become adults. They won't have to worry about trying to re-educate an adult. They won't have to worry about teaching an old dog new tricks. They will already have taken over their hearts and minds. So we have to do what we can to protect our kids, folks. The conversation that my wife and I were having about this, and we're very protective. And I feel we are um, very, very protective of what our kids are allowed to see and hear. Um, but we've agreed that we're going to have to be even more. We're going to have to be even more cautious about what they're allowed to see and hear. Um, because we know that they are going to be probably doing about everything they can um, to push these very radical ideas onto the kids, and in teaching children basically to question. If you look at the statistics of how many kids nowadays in middle school or junior high or whatever it's called in high school that they don't have the same religion of their parents, or ones that consider themselves bisexual, or ones that consider or are accepting of socialism. If you look at these statistics, they're extremely high um, in many of these categories, and it's because of how we've been allowing our children to be taught. Those of us, or those of you that still have your children in public schools. Um, that was the greatest mistake Americans ever made, I believe, is turning over the education and really the raising of our kids to the government. Um, we, we've really done a disservice to our children. Children in most cultures, and this is true in most cultures, but children should always be looked upon as our most prized thing that we have. And instead, here in the United States, we viewed going to a job, having a career, getting an education, building wealth, doing whatever with our lives is more important, which is why we thought it was okay to turn the responsibility of raising our children over to the state. That relinquished it from us for a few hours a day and allowed us to kind of go about our business. When in fact, we should have seen all along that there is nothing more important than our children. They are our future. And if we don't regain control of how our children are being raised, we may not lose this nation this time around, but we will eventually. It is inevitable. So those of you that are parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, if you have a child in your life, do everything you can to protect that child. And I'm not just meaning protecting their mind, but protecting their body also. There's a large growing movement to not just legalize, but normalize pedophilia. Many of you already know this. We are at war. And the war that we are engaged in, a big part of it right now, is against our children. I mean, certainly many other areas. But they know that if they can win over the children more and more, if they can get more of a hold, more control over what goes inside that child's mind, then in the end, they know that they will win. It's inevitable. So when you're working on your preps, when you're making your plans, when you're talking to your spouse about how things are probably going to have to change in your home because of all the stuff that's happening, how you have to be a little bit more cautious about things, how you need to restructure your spending, how you need to focus on improving these skills or improving these supplies, or maybe even physically moving to a new location. You need to be talking about how to protect your children from all this. Protect your children from the people in charge. Protect your children from education departments and health departments. I was watching a video just today. Someone shared it over in the Telegram chat group, which, if you're not part of the Telegram chat group, you need to be. It's a group set up. There's about 400 of us over there, and it's just growing, and some of the best conversation going on. And there'll be a link in the description below to get over there and join that chat group. But in the video, the guy was talking about some legislation in Tennessee. And it's basically where the health department can, because of this health crisis, of course, and they're worried about the mental health of the child and the physical health of the child, that the health department can go door to door now, check on your child. They can talk to your child without the parent present. They can give them a shot in the arm without the parent's permission. They can isolate them, put them through any type of therapy, all sorts of stuff. Question how they're being taught at home on gender identity issues. There are, just all this kind of stuff, and that's what they're trying to get past in Tennessee. And Tennessee isn't a crazy moonbat liberal state either, although they've been doing some things lately that I starting to wonder about them. Over in England, they're trying to get legislation passed that makes it okay, makes it legal for the police, the government, to use the children to spy on the parents, to use them as informants. We saw with the things that transpired at the Capitol a couple of weeks ago, how many people reported that children and cousins and nieces and nephews turned in their parents and their family members. That's very Orwellian, right out of 1984. This is what they're planning. And it's only going to get worse. You have to remember, folks, all the stuff that you've seen, let's just say in the last year, that's happened in other parts of the world, England and Europe and New Zealand and Canada, and we've said, oh man, that's pretty awful. The government really cracked down on those people. It's a good thing we live in America. It's not quite that bad here. You have to remember, right now, the people that are running this country, they think America should be just as enlightened as all those European and Canadian countries. That's right. So all those ridiculous laws that you've seen happen in other parts of the world, they're probably going to try to get that going here in America, because they want America to be just as enlightened and progressive as all those other European countries. But protect your children, folks. They're not saying it right out in front. But if you really start looking at a lot of the stuff that people within this administration and people that support this administration are talking about, that's where they're heading. That's definitely one of their priorities, is to gain control, full control of what is taught to your children and how your child is taught to think. And when that day comes, then yeah, we have lost. It is over. So do everything you can now to protect those pure, innocent minds that you have, that are a complete miracle and blessing to you. All right, folks. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.